Okay, we are diving straight into the thick of it today, skipping the usual preamble. Our starting point is a really vivid scene from a recent anti-immigration rally in Sydney.
Right, so you have to picture the atmosphere. It's passionate, lots of angry crowds full of existing political loyalists, but then you see this new splash of color. A figure in a hat is handing out these mysterious uh, teal pamphlets. And they're, for a political venture you probably never heard of, Reform Australia.
That's right. And for anyone who watches the complex, often chaotic world of Australian minor party politics, this just instantly jumps out. The message on those leaflets was, well, pretty unambiguous. The major parties have failed us, and the minor parties are too fragmented. Join us.
It's the ultimate pitch to the politically homeless conservative voter, isn't it? And our mission for this deep dive is really to pull back the curtain on this organization. We're going to investigate exactly who is behind Reform Australia, what their complicated political and business ties are, and, whether they have any realistic shot at competing.
Let's start with the surface level, because the branding choices here are, well, they're hard to ignore. Reform Australia, teal color scheme. It's a very clear echo of Nigel Farage's outfit, Reform UK.
Absolutely. The similarity is so striking you have to address it immediately, and Reform UK has formally denied any link, any backing for this Australian group. This is apparently an entirely homegrown operation.
Right, but one that's adopted a very recognizable international look. And crucially, we should note, Reform Australia is not yet a registered political party with the AEC, and those pamphlets, the ones at the Sydney rally, they lacked the required authorization.
That is quite the posture to take when you haven't even registered yet. So naturally, the first thing we did was go straight to the digital trail. If you wonder who's behind a mysterious movement, you look at who registered at the website.
And that search led us directly to a name that rings a very loud bell within the NSW Liberal Party establishment, Walter Villatora.
Villatora is the individual the primary Reform Australia website is registered to. And this is not some anonymous activist. He is a significant former figure in the Liberal Party, a former branch president in Warringah, and a very well-known backer of former Prime Minister Tony Abbott.
A branch president, just for anyone unfamiliar, is a huge role. It means you hold real power in the local grassroots organization. You're deep inside the tent. He was also at one time a hopeful for pre-selection himself.
Exactly. So his profile is that of a quintessential liberal insider who has now, it seems, decided to launch an external insurgency. And this immediately creates a huge tension around his current status. Villatora publicly claims he has left the Liberal Party.
But, and here's where the story gets sticky, our sources indicate that internally he remains listed as a current Liberal member. We know he's no longer the president of the Condamine branch, but his name hasn't been scrubbed from the lists.
And that's the critical point, isn't it? How can you credibly launch a movement based on the failure of the established party when you are, on paper, still a member of that party?
It just completely undermines the narrative of a clean break. How do you convince people you're a true alternative when you still have one foot in the old structure?
It's a huge vulnerability. But their recruitment pitch, it tries to bypass that. They frame it as a kind of rescue mission. Their big tent approach tells people that our supposed conservative party has lost its way, abandoning the values of hard work, family, and freedom.
So they're positioning themselves as the true conservatives, less about ideological opposition and more about internal disappointment.
Precisely. And this makes a lot more sense when we look beyond the Liberal Party and at Villatora's other business interests, specifically his connection to Turning Point Australia, or TPA.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Villatora is listed in business records as the co-owner of the company that runs TPA. TPA is the local franchise of Charlie Kirk's hugely influential conservative youth outfit in the U.S., and it's run here by Joel Jamal.
This U.S. link is crucial. It provides both infrastructure and, ideological grounding. And TPA already has established links to that international populist scene.
Right. We saw that back in 2022 when TPA was promoting an evening with Nigel Farage during his Australian tour. Though we should clarify the timeline here. The sources note Villatora wasn't a shareholder in TPA at that specific point.
Correct. But the proximity and ideological alignment are just undeniable. But now the rise of Reform Australia has forced a separation between Villatora and TPA, and it's a separation mandated by law.
Wait, so they are actively dissolving their business relationship. Why is that necessary?
Well, it speaks volumes about how serious they are about becoming a formal political party. Joel Jamal, who manages TPA, stated very clearly that he is not involved with Reform Australia.
Even though his name was briefly listed as technical support on an early website registration for RA? That sounds messy.
It is a bit messy, but Jamal explained that because TPA is registered with the AEC as a third-party campaigner, they have to adhere to really strict standards of separation from any active political party.
Ah, I see. So this isn't just a convenient breakup. It's a legal necessity. They have to break up commercially for TPA to stay independent and for Villator to launch this new party.
Exactly. And Villator confirmed this. He said he concluded his involvement with TPA to focus on Reform Australia. The shared roots are now legally forced to be separate organizations.
Okay, so let's turn to the brand they're actually presenting to the public right now, because their early marketing gives us some strong clues about the exact demographic they're trying to capture.
Well, if you look at their social media, Reform Australia is already running ads with a figure named Ben Britton. Britton's a former Liberal candidate who is supposed to contest the 2025 federal election. This is a very pointed choice.
It connects RA directly back to the talent pool that the Liberal Party recently rejected, and rejected for very specific, very high-profile reasons.
That's right. Britton was dumped from the Liberal campaign just this past April. He made comments on Jamal's podcast, the TPA-linked podcast, saying women shouldn't serve in defense combat positions due to the potential physical impact.
So Reform Australia is actively positioning itself as the home for candidates who were deemed too controversial or, I guess, too far right for the modern liberal platform.
Yep.
That's a very specific political vacuum they're trying to fill.
And their content alignment really supports this strategy. They're sharing material supportive of March for Australia. They're advocating for nuclear power. And they're also sharing those TPA videos on polarizing topics like child grooming.
It's a very clear effort to activate that socially conservative segment of the electorate. But even their digital strategy, the most basic part, appears messy, which is ironic for a group whose entire pitch is solving fragmentation. We found evidence of a second, separate website named Reformo.
Yes, the confusing digital twin. Web and business records link this secondary site to a Queensland man named Luke Ashwood. Now, here's the detail that really highlights their current disorganized state. The Join button on Ashwood's site, it doesn't lead anywhere new. It redirects straight back to Villator's main Reform Australia website.
So they have two different entities run by two different people in two different states, both trying to capture the same audience, but ultimately pointing back to one central figure. It's a fractured launch for a party trying to solve fracture.
Which brings us to the big, unavoidable question. Can any political venture launched this way succeed in Australia's already crowded minor party landscape?
Let's look at the expert analysis on this, because political strategists are highly skeptical. We have the critique from Yaron Finkelstein, who is a former chief political strategist for Scott Morrison.
Finkelstein highlights two critical structural obstacles that Reform Australia faces if they're trying to replicate the success of Farage's movements.
And what are those big structural differences that make Australia such a tough nut to crack?
First, Australia fundamentally lacks a Brexit springboard. The UK Reform Party capitalized on a massive, singular political event, the vote to leave the EU, that defined politics for years. We just don't have that.
That makes perfect sense. Without a huge single issue, you have to rely entirely on personality.
Which is the second obstacle. Australia is missing a clear equivalent of a leader like Nigel Farage, whose brand was, 20 years in the making. Villator is an insider launching an outsider party. Farage was an outsider building an outsider movement.
That distinction is huge. But even if they could find the leader, what's the next biggest hurdle?
The ground game. Finkelstein notes that very few new parties actually have the grassroots infrastructure to convert online hype into actual votes. He pointed out that even Reform UK had to dedicate significant time to building a proper physical presence. It's hard work.
And they're trying to break into a field that is fiercely contested. Election analyst Ben Rao notes there is indeed a structural incentive for these groups to consolidate their votes, but the reality is that Australia already has lots of parties like that.
Exactly. They just don't all share the Reform name. Reform Australia is entering a space already dominated by highly effective forces, and the most prominent player here is Pauline Hanson's One Nation.
And One Nation isn't just surviving, they are thriving. Their support has reportedly soared to almost 20% since the last federal election. 20% is enormous for a minor party.
And their success is demonstrably impacting the mainstream. One Nation's popularity is already influencing the coalition to pivot further right on big issues like energy and, crucially, immigration. The coalition is chasing One Nation's voters.
So Ari is trying to solve conservative fragmentation at a time when the most successful player, One Nation, is already highly visible and actively pulling the mainstream conservatives in their direction.
It's an incredibly high-stakes effort. They are launching an organization that claims to fix conservative politics, but its founder is still, on paper, part of the system he's attacking. And their star candidate was jettisoned for being too extreme for the party they intend to replace.
To synthesize this for you, we have Reform Australia, a new venture trying to consolidate the socially conservative vote under a UK-inspired brand. It's led by Walter Villatora, an establishment figure with complex ties, and it's leveraging figures like Ben Britton who were politically exiled.
They're important because they represent an organized attempt to harness that deep discontent in the coalition's base. But they face huge skepticism about their viability. They lack a catalyst like Brexit, and they are competing directly with a hugely successful player like One Nation.
And this all loops back to that idea of consolidation versus fragmentation. The structural incentive for these groups to unite is there, but given the specific and sometimes contradictory history of figures like Villatora, with one foot in and one foot out of the Liberal Party, and the baggage carried by figures like Britain, this raises a core question for you to think about. What impact will that specific complex history have on their ability to build a truly unified big tent brand, or will they simply become another footnote in the fragmented history they claim to be solving?